Good morning. My name is Luke Vanderden. To continue this morning's discussion on the U.S.-Japan alliance, it is my pleasure to welcome the Honorable Bill Hagerty, U.S. Senator from Tennessee and former U.S. Ambassador to Japan. And to moderate the discussion will be Demetri, Sevastopulo, U.S.-China Correspondent with the Financial Times.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Senator, good morning. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Certainly.
We've got 10 minutes. We're speed dating. And, we can decide how it goes at the end.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who spent time in Japan as an ambassador and has watched Japan very closely, what has surprised you the most about how Japan has shifted, whether it's foreign or defense policy or...
Demetri, I've been watching Japan since I first moved there in 1988. I started my career at a firm called the Boston Consulting Group, and they sent me to Tokyo for 3 years, back at the time when the economy was super hot. And that's when I learned to speak Japanese. The economy was, they just overtaken the Soviet Union to become the number 2 economy in the world. And Ezra Vogel wrote a book, Japan is number 1. Some of you probably read that. There were real discussions here in America, would we be overtaken? And the trade tensions were enormously high at that point in time, too. You think about it. UAW workers were smashing what was then called a Datsun vehicle, now Nissan. You had congressmen that were smashing Sony Toshiba radios on the steps of the Capitol. They were negotiating something called the Strategic Impediments Initiative when I was over there. Everybody in the United States was focused on getting a trade deal with Japan. And going back to the previous occupant of the house I was honored to live in when I served as ambassador, when General MacArthur came and rewrote the Constitution, he also tried to create favorable trade terms for Japan so that they would be trading with us, not with the communists in the region. The problem is he didn't time limit that. He didn't put any other type of limitations in terms of GDP. So Japan is a much more favorable trade terrain than we do, and no incentive, therefore, to enter trade agreements. We actually got that done when I was ambassador. I went back after the 3-year period. I've stayed involved with Japan. I've watched it. The economy, the bubble burst in Japan right after I left, and the economy went into a couple of decades. They call it the lost decades. But when I got back to Japan, things were quite different. And the biggest changes were this. One, the security posture had changed dramatically. Kim Jong-un was a big driver of that. The Japanese played a role in the world stage that I had never seen before. They were on the United Nations Security Council at that point. They worked so closely with us. And were it not for Prime Minister Abe, we would not have gotten through 3 consecutively stronger sets of economic sanctions on North Korea that were really biting. And we got the Chinese and the Russians to agree to it. And Abe played a critical role there. Prime Minister Abe and I talked constantly about his desire to increase their military posture. He wanted to go to 2% of GDP in terms of their military expenditures while he was serving as Prime Minister. The time wasn't right then. But I'll say this now, you've seen it happen. After the fall of Afghanistan, after Russia's entry into Ukraine, people in Japan have become very nervous about what will happen in the Taiwan Strait. And with that shift in mindset, the minority party, you're familiar with the Komeito party that the LDP rules together with, that coalition. Their coalition partner has been a pacifist. They're a Buddhist-affiliated party. They're a pacifist. Abe could not get that agreement to expand their military posture. After the public sentiment changed, looking at the Taiwan Strait, everything changed. Komeito, Yamaguchi-san, who runs that, they're now cooperating in expanding their military posture. So that is a very definite change as well. And if you think about the situation that Japan has been through from a political and diplomatic standpoint, the challenges in that region, in Japan's historic challenges, are very real, and they have a tough history in the region. But seeing the breakthroughs that have taken place, and I applaud the Biden administration for working this hard with a new prime minister coming into South Korea, President Yoon, and Prime Minister Kishida in Japan, they have taken the opportunity to, I think, really step forward in terms of working together with South Korea, and the United States has played a great role in deepening the trilateral relationship there. You all are familiar with the Camp David meeting that just happened in August. President Biden met together with the 2 leaders from Japan and South Korea. They are saying all the right things. And I'm trying to advance that even further by having an economic conference in November on the West Coast inviting senior business leaders from Japan, South Korea, and America to meet. Let's deepen the economic ties the same way that we're trying to deepen our diplomatic ties and our military ties. And on the military point, I'll just add one other thing. When I was serving as ambassador to Japan, I worked very hard on improving our foreign military sales program. There was a huge backlog, meaning Japan had agreed to put in place a military system, but we weren't delivering it. Over 700 cases, as they call it, in fact. And so we really focused on that and began chipping away. We're still working on it. The team is still reporting to me in my new position now. But we have an opportunity to create more bonds from a technological and an interoperability standpoint. Now that Japan's stepping up their expenditures, it's a real opportunity for us. And my encouragement to my friends in Japan is not to make this just a procurement exercise. It's about capabilities. It's about interoperability. And we need to find ways to cooperate. I've seen it in real time, the Yamasakura exercises where we do joint exercises, seeing dramatic progress there. We need to keep doing that. We need to work with South Korea to do it. I've applauded the Biden administration's work in the region on AUKUS. There are many very positive things happening right now.
So, I mean, a huge amount has been done in recent years. What do you think is the biggest challenge the US and Japan face in terms of doing more together as an alliance as China rises? If there were one thing you could fix, what would it be?
I think that it's underway, but I think the U.S.-Japan alliance is continuing to deepen. I applaud Ambassador Emanuel's work in that regard. We've got an example in place with the trade agreement that was struck when I served as ambassador, and I worked very hard on this. But the digital trade agreement that exists between the U.S. and Japan is a high standard model of how we can collaborate in a way that will facilitate innovation. And it will also counter the type of tactics that Communist China uses. By having the ability to have high standards, by not allowing data localization requirements that would require you, for example, to turn over your source code, requirements that would force you to localize, meaning put your servers behind some great firewall. Those sorts of standards should be moved out into the entire region. It will help all of us. And I don't think the constituencies here in Washington that tend to resist trade agreements would be resistant to this. I think there's a real opening here. We can insert this in IPEF. That's the current economic dialogue that's going on. There's no market access in it right now, but this is a great opportunity for us. So I've been encouraging the administration. I want to work with them to see if we can't use this as a way to push forward. And innovation, technological innovation, I think can be the real key. You've seen the CHIPS Act passed here. I've been talking with my friends in Japan and in South Korea about doing joint research and development here in the United States on high technology areas. I'm talking quantum computing, hypersonics, semiconductor activity. I work very hard to get permitting fixes through at the same time that we put CHIP through so that we can get these high technology, high security areas permitted much more rapidly than we have been.
And do you think the recent trilateral with the US, Japan, and South Korea, that opens up a pathway for Japan and South Korea to do more technology cooperation together?
I certainly do, Demetri, and we need to keep pushing on it. And again, that's why I'm pushing the private sector side of this. And from a parochial standpoint, the national lab with the broadest portfolio of any is in my home state of Tennessee. It's Oak Ridge National Lab. So I'm encouraging the type of basic research and cooperation that we can do here in America. I think we have the largest market. We have the ability to facilitate this, and I'd like to see a lot more technological cooperation. And they have great capabilities in both Japan and South Korea.
When you were living in Japan, most recently as ambassador, what was the one Japanese technology that most surprised you that you've never seen or heard about?
Well, NEC Corporation, many of you are familiar with NEC, very cutting edge technological company. Marita Sun, their CEO, is actually coming to our conference. And we'll be talking about this in November at Stanford. But their ability, their facial recognition technology, their understanding and capabilities for the next generation of 5G, 6G, and so forth, they're really thinking hard about this. And they understand the challenges from a cybersecurity standpoint, from an information security standpoint, because of their proximity to countries like North Korea, Russia, China, right there in the neighborhood. So they're experiencing a different sort of pressure. We're certainly getting it here too, but I think there's a great opportunity for collaboration and technology in that regard as we look to the next generation of communications technology and how we do that in a secure fashion.
So I want to ask you about Taiwan. It used to be in Japan that Taiwan was like Baltimore. You didn't say the name out loud. Now you go to Japanese bookshops, and it's, will there be war in Taiwan? Mm-hmm. Can we defeat the Chinese? Books you never would have seen before. Do you think Japan would join the US if the US got into a conflict with China over Taiwan?
Well, I'd say every step is moving in that direction. Prime Minister Abe was very much pro-Taiwan. If you look at Prime Minister Kishida's latest appointment to defense minister, he's the head of the parliamentary Japan-Taiwan alliance. I work with him because there's a trilateral Taiwan, US, Japan parliamentary alliance that I represent the United States and then the Senate side for that. So I see the movement in that direction. The concern is definitely there, Demetri. I think that Japan's view is, were Taiwan to go, guess who's next? And they need to be ready. So they have been moving in that direction, very cooperative with us. And I think that every move so far has been trending in that direction.
Final question, yes, no answer only. Do you agree with Kono Taro that when politicians make mistakes, they should lose their salary?
Yes. And Kono-san is a great friend of mine too. I'm glad he was here.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's been
Thank
a pleasure. I'd like a big round of applause for Senator Hagerty.
Thank you all. Yep.